Hello, my name's Anne Labar and I'm the Vicar of Seal Church, and I've got a story to tell you today, a story for the children of Seal School or for anyone else who'd like to listen to it. But before we start, I'm going to light our candle as we always do at Seal School. If you come to Seal Church and you walk up the pathway towards the church, you'll see above the doorway there is a little statue, a sculpture. It's a statue of a man. It's St. Peter, because our church is dedicated to, named after St. Peter and St. Paul. I can tell you a bit more about St. Paul another time, but today I'd like to tell you the story of the first time that Peter met Jesus. And the first thing we need to know is that actually Peter wasn't called Peter then. That was a nickname that Jesus gave to him. His real name was Simon, and Simon was a fisherman. Now, on the day that this story happened, Simon had been out fishing. He'd been fishing all night in his little boat with his brother Andrew, and their friends James and John had been with them in their boat. But they'd fished all night and they'd caught nothing, not even a minnow, not even a tiny little tiddler. It was as if all the fish in the Sea of Galilee where they were fishing had hidden, had gone away somewhere else. Still, it happened sometimes like that when you were a fisherman. You won some and you lost some. But all the same, they were pretty disappointed as they rowed back towards Capernaum, where they lived on the side of the lake. They rowed themselves back to the beach and they pulled the boat up onto the shingle, the sand there, and they got out and they took their nets out and they began to wash them so they'd be ready for the next time when they hoped they'd have a bit more luck. As Simon was washing the nets, though, he looked along the beach and he saw that there along the beach there was a crowd gathering, and in the middle of the crowd there was a man who was talking to them. Who can that be, he thought. I know, it must be that man Jesus. He'd heard about Jesus. Jesus had come from his hometown of Nazareth, high up in the hills, and he'd come to Capernaum, and he'd been teaching in their synagogue, where people came together to worship. In fact, Simon's wife had told him of a time when Jesus had come to their house while he wasn't there, and had healed Simon's wife's mother of an illness that she had. But Simon hadn't thought too much of it at the time. It was nothing to do with him. He didn't know what was going on. He was just a fisherman. All he cared about was catching fish, making a living, doing his job. But there was this Jesus, speaking to a crowd along his beach. And as he watched, Jesus left the crowd and he walked right towards him. Well, Simon didn't know what was happening. Why was he coming to speak to him? And he came to him and he said, "Excuse me, could I ask a favour? Could you row me out just a little way onto the lake so that I can speak to the crowd from your boat? Because at the moment they're all crowding around me and they're so close that no one can see or really hear anything." Well, Simon felt very tired. He'd been hoping just to go to bed after that long night of fishing. But when he looked at Jesus, he thought, there's something special about this man, isn't there? And he wanted to help. So he helped Jesus into the boat and he rowed out just a little way from the shore. And Jesus sat down in the boat facing the shoreline and all of the people who were standing there, and he began to talk. And he talked and talked and talked. He told stories, he answered questions, he told people about how much God loved them and how they could love one another. And Simon couldn't help himself. He hadn't really meant to listen, just really was hoping for a bit of a snooze, but somehow or other he couldn't help but listen and be drawn in by these wonderful stories Jesus was telling. Jesus talked for a long time, but it didn't seem like long at all to Simon as he listened. Eventually, though, Jesus sent the crowd away, and they all dispersed, and there was just Simon and Andrew and Jesus in the boat, and James and John not far off in their boat. And Jesus said to Simon, "Simon, now that all the crowd have gone away, why don't you row back out into the middle of the lake to where the water's deepest and throw down your nets for a catch of fish?" Well, Simon looked at Jesus and he said, "Sorry, but I'm the fisherman here. I know about fish. I know that we fished all night and we didn't catch anything. And if the fish weren't there last night, they won't be there now either." But as he said it, he looked at Jesus and Jesus looked at him. And Simon remembered all those wise and kind things that Jesus had been saying to the crowd. And he thought, this is an extraordinary man. I wonder what would happen if I trusted him and took him at his word and rowed out into the deep water and put down my nets. So he thought he'd try it. He'd take a risk on Jesus. And so he and Andrew rowed the boat back out into the deep water. And when they got there, they took their nets and they threw it over the side, and down the net sank into the water until it was quite out of sight. And they left it a while, and then they started to pull it up. And Simon expected that it would be just like it had been during the night, that as they pulled it up there'd be nothing in it. But he felt that it was quite heavy. The rope was hard to pull. He pulled and he pulled, and he got Andrew to come over, and they pulled together, and they pulled and they pulled, and they kept pulling until this great heavy weight of the net was just below the surface of the water, and they looked over the edge of the boat, and the net was full of fish. Silvery, shiny, wonderful fish. Where had they come from? Anyway, the net was so heavy they had to get James and John from the other boat to come over and help them pull, and all four of them pulled and they pulled and they pulled until finally they heaved the net over the side of the boat, and all the fish spilled out into the bottom of the boat. There were so many fish you couldn't even begin to count them. Simon had never seen so many fish as that. And all of a sudden he was overwhelmed, not just with fish, but with the fact that Jesus had chosen him, had chosen his boat. The fact that Jesus had taken them out and had shown them how to catch these fish. Why had Jesus done that? Why had he chosen Simon? Simon didn't know, because he was just an ordinary person who got it wrong as often as he got it right and made a mess of things and said things before he'd thought about them. And he said to Jesus, "Jesus, I'm not good enough to be your friend. If you want people to come and join you and to join and to do the things that you're doing, you're going to have to look for better people than me. I think you've come to the wrong place. Please go away and find someone better to be your friend." But Jesus looked at Simon and he said, "I've chosen you. All these years you've been gathering fish together, but I'm going to help you now to gather people together. To gather people together so that they can learn how much God loves them and everyone else too." And that's what happened. Simon and Andrew rowed back with James and John to Capernaum, back to that beach, and then they got out of their boats and they left their boats and all those fish for the people of Capernaum, and they went off and they followed Jesus and they learned from him. And in time, Jesus gave Simon that new name, Peter, because he said Peter meant a rock. That's what the word means. And he said that Simon Peter would be the rock that everyone else could trust, someone who they could rely on. And that's why Peter became Saint Peter and became so important. And that's why he's in that little statue. He's there as a statue above our doorway. That's why our church is called after him. There are lots of stories I could tell you about St. Peter, but that's all we've got time for the moment. I wonder what you thought of that story. Perhaps you could talk to the people around you. I wonder what you thought the best bit of the story was. I wonder what it would have been like to sit in the boat and listen to Jesus talking. I wonder what it would have been like to have rowed out into the deep water and thrown your nets over the side of the boat and caught all those fish. Anyway, that's all we've time for today, so it's time to blow out the candle. Are you going to help me to blow? I'll count to 3 and then we'll blow together. Ready? 1, 2, 3, blow. Bye for now.